Hey y'all, my name is Kennedey Bell, and I'm a Communication Studies major and Early Elementary Education minor. Today I'll be presenting my IS Disconnect, a rhetorical analysis of the discourse over Ohio's EdChoice program. Going into writing my IS, I knew that I wanted to do research on something that combined the skills I've learned in the Communication Studies department, as well as my passion for education. While I had quite a few other ideas for topics, the debate over EdChoice started to pick up when I was in junior IS, and I was hearing about the growth of public schools being designated as failures in the education forums that I'm a part of and from educators that I knew. At the same time, I was taking rhetorical criticism with Dr. Bosdorf, and as I hadn't taken any other methods courses, I knew that I would need to utilize qualitative methods in my study. Working with Dr. Singh, I decided to study EdChoice using a rhetorical device as my methods, and I will expand more fully on this as I go through my presentation. Before going into the purpose of the study, my methods, and most importantly, my analysis, I will explain EdChoice in the simplest way I can. EdChoice is a scholarship program that sponsors students who, one, fall below 200% of the poverty line, and or two, attend public schools that are considered failing by the state on a set of 6 standards. I should note that this system has actually changed since I began and collected my interviews. This is a system that was in place when I was doing my study, but Senate Bill 89 was passed in November of 2020, and this states that only the bottom 20% of public schools will be placed on the EdChoice designated school list, and then only schools with 20 or more percent students taking federal program Title I funds will be placed on that list. Essentially, EdChoice gives students a scholarship, either funded by the state or through the local school district, depending on what scholarship, to move from their public school to a private school in their area, either because they have a lack of access to private schools due to poverty, or because their public school is not providing adequate education according to the Ohio Department of Education. The purpose of my study shifted in some ways from junior to senior IS, but in the end comes down to 2 points. First, to demonstrate how controversial topics such as EdChoice may create tension between 2 groups, such as private and public schools, who have a similar goal in providing quality education to students. Second, to explore how policies and media depictions of EdChoice show a lack of understanding between the creators and the implementers of the policy. To achieve this, I utilized rhetorical analysis. I began the study utilizing Burkean criticism, trying to find God terms and devil terms. However, as I moved further into the study, took theories of human communication, and worked with Dr. Rosante, I changed my underlying theory to that of Walter Fisher's narrative paradigm, which argues people try to persuade through stories or story-like elements. I therefore looked at the key terms found in Burkean criticism and attempted to make stories. My sources for these key terms came from 3 places. First, the policy documents, primarily Chapter 3310 in the Ohio Revised Code, news articles from around Ohio during the peak of the debate, November 2019 to April 2020, and interviews with public and private school administrators. My analysis section consists of 2 parts. First, the stories, and second, the implications. My characters come from the key terms I found while doing Burkean criticism, EdChoice, and in the case of news articles, the grading system is distinguished from EdChoice, public schools, private schools, and the legislature. In each of the sources I analyzed, these 4 or 5 characters had different roles and different impacts on one another. These different impacts, in turn, had several implications. First, the villainization of private schools and victimization of public schools leads to an unfair burden on private schools, as well as forgives public schools for the many problems that do exist. While EdChoice does unfairly punish public schools, and in many ways does not solve the problems that the Ohio Department of Education is attempting to address, It is also not right to swing the pendulum the other direction. Moreover, the lack of certain perspectives in the media, namely that of private schools, leads to the neglect of private schools and their students. In interviewing private school administrators, it is clear that EdChoice does not work for them, and private schools are still underfunded, and because the perspectives are missing from the media, the public may not know the difficulty that private schools face in actually getting the funding from the schools or from the state. Finally, there's a lack of critical engagement with the implementers of the policy, both from the public and from the state. The state does not seem to be discussing EdChoice policy or changes to the policy with educators and administrators, making it difficult for the policy to reflect the needs of schools and their students. The shock of the expansion of schools on the EDS list in late 2019 shows that they did not understand the policy that they themselves had created. And though Senate Bill 89 originally had the support of the Ohio Education Association, within the last stages of it passing, the Senate made changes against the Ohio Education Association's desires. Of course, the OEA does not speak for all educators. However, it is one of the largest associations of educators in Ohio, and that shows that they are unwilling to listen to the people who work in the schools. In addition, there's a general lack of knowledge about EdChoice and the issues schools face. EdChoice is typically only mentioned when a school goes on the EDS list, and as I have stated, private schools, guardians, and legislatures are left out of the discussion, which skews information on the topic for those not deeply involved in the issue. Therefore, my conclusions are that extreme victimization and villainization leads to the neglect of both organizations. The state needs to rely on the knowledge and experiences of teachers, administrators, guardians, and students, all who must live with the consequences of EdChoice in their day-to-day. Finally, the audience must critically engage with the information both presented in the popular media, asking questions such as who is writing the article and why, what perspectives are missing, what power does the language have, and question the information presented by those that they know, even if they are administrators, even if they are teachers. Overall, there are many areas in my study that are lacking, but I hope that this study shows the need to have perspectives of all those affected by policy in the debates in Congress. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you learned at least something while listening.